Hey guys! So apparently I'm not done with pumpkins just yet, and I wanted to create a wreath to celebrate this most glorious and mighty of all the gourds. Okay, full disclosure, this intro is an experiment to see just how long it takes before my editor breaks from all the pumpkins. I haven't made one of these in a while and it shows. I completely forgot that the larger foam rings, the 12-inch ones, were a complete nightmare to get at this time of year. I've previously had to order them well in advance, but I just plumb forgot this time. I managed to get the 8.5-inch instead, and I have worked with this size before. It's smaller than I'd like, but it's not completely a lost cause. I just need to bear in mind that I have a lot less foam estate to work with and keep things fairly small. Okay, so I'm going for a harvest themed autumnal colour palette here, so I'm sticking to muted tones and actively avoiding orange. Don't ask me why, but I kind of got sick of looking at orange lately. Maybe it's because of the order mix-up with the previous project and I was forced to stare at those pumpkin charms, trying to ignore the abject disappointment building up with each day that I couldn't complete it. And if you beady-eyed people out there are thinking, but Patricia, you have orange nails right now. Well, yeah, that's how long I've been waiting. Anyway, I digress. I will of course have all the colours listed in the description box below for your perusal. I started with making the pumpkins. I wanted to make small ones, so I kept my foundation rows between 10 and 14 stitches. Using the half double crochet stitch and crocheting into the back loops only, I crocheted till around 14 rows give or take. Now, when I got to the end, I cut off and left a tail here, but you can also just carry on and slip stitch the two ends together. It really doesn't matter whether you slip or whip stitch the ends together, it's just a matter of your own preference. Next, I wove the tapestry needle back and forth through the stitches so that I could then use the tail to cinch and tighten the circle closed. With the bottom closed, I then switched to the other end and repeated the process, but instead of tightening the end closed, I stuffed the pumpkin good and proper and left a small circle. I used the edges of the small hole I had left untightened to crochet the stalk. I just went around using single crochet stitches to build up this little guy. I then crocheted the vines right onto the surface of each pumpkin. I made a few of them off camera, and I actually had to stop myself making more because making these tiny guys was so enjoyable that time just flew by. I varied the colours and played around with the ones I had chosen. Experimentation is a key part of crochet and it's absolutely the part I love the most. But I had to rein myself in, otherwise I'd be squashed under a sea of pumpkins right now. Okay, so who remembers geometry? Oh, bloody hell. Well, forget about that. I just measured the circumference of the ring. Not the whole circumference, but the donut circumference bit. You know what I'm talking about. Just look at the video and you'll see. Oh, by the way, what do you get if you divide the diameter of a pumpkin by its circumference? Pumpkin pie! That measurement came out at around 5.5 inches or just under. Anyway, I then crocheted to that length, making sure to test my foundation row against the ring to make sure that the two edges would meet in the middle without any overlap. Once I was happy with my foundation row, I then used double crochet to really grow the piece. I started off with the copper shade and worked my way along, switching colours every few rows and tried to be as random as I could. started off with the copper shade and worked my way along, switching colours every few rows and trying to be as random as I could. After I got the right length, I slip stitched the two ends together to join them. Since both sides basically look the same, there really isn't a wrong or right side to this piece. Just pick the side you are happiest with and go with that. I picked my side and stretched it around the donut. I also like to turn the unjoined rounds so that they are facing outwards, which will make them easier to whip stitch later on. Admittedly, I did have quite a bit of bunching, so I frogged back a couple of rows and that was enough for it to fit without any gaping. The point is to ride that fine line between tight and too tight. If your final piece is too small, you'll have to stretch it across the foam and that can lead to the stitches showing gaps. Yes, you'll get a super tight fit, but you will also end up with the foam showing through. You could of course paint the foam donut to disguise the gaps, but why bother? It's really not necessary and it's an extra step. Plus the drying time and then having to seal it in case the paint gets wet because it's going on an outside door and can rub off onto the yarn, and picking the paint colours and washing the paint. The list goes on. In short, what I'm trying to say, without being too type A, is that there are a multitude of ways to cover up and hide your mistakes, but the aim is to try and get it as close to ideal as possible in the first place. I pinned around the outer perimeter and used the invisible seam stitch to sew the ends together. With that done, I then rotated the piece so that the seam would be on the inside and out of sight. I made a few leaves in various colours to add onto the wreath as decorative items. I did a few large statement leaves, but I think I only ended up using 2 in the end. I also made quite a few smaller ones to dot around, and those I did very simply with no frills at all. I chained 10 plus 2, and from the second chain from the hook I travelled back, varying between single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, triple crochet and slip stitches, making sure that what I had done on one side I repeated identically on the other side to make it symmetrical. Okay, so this was the point in every project when it looks a hot mess before it starts to look better. And not gonna lie, it was looking like a hot mess. Because of my recording setup, I kept bumping into the camera. This became rapidly annoying, so eventually I had to do most of the assembly off camera. My apologies. I just laid out roughly where I wanted everything to go and started to sew things down. With one leaf left, I remembered I needed the tab thing for this wreath to hang from, so I whipped up a rectangle using single crochet to keep the stitches dense and therefore sturdy, and eventually sewed this to the back of the wreath. I made sure to match the tab colour to the same one that landed on the natural centre of gravity point, and in my case that was the dark green. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, and if you've stayed this far, bless you for putting up with my pumpkins. Please like, share, comment, and even consider subscribing if you like the content I create. Don't forget to hit that bell button to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, let's get the pumpkins started and give them pumpkin to talk about in the beauty shots. See you in the next one. Bye! Okay, so does anyone know any good editors? I may have lost mine.